Hello and welcome to another episode of But Have You Heard About Conspiracy Theory Edition? Da 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 da. I just want to pop in real fucking quick because I had recorded this on Zoom, which never do that for a podcast. I mean, if you're doing more than like two people. This is with quite a few individuals, so just FYI. Anyways, I just want to go ahead and come in and do some introductions with a kind of like a re-record. Anyways, I want to introduce you to the wonderful gaggle of ladies I have on this podcast. First, we have Erika, who's been on the podcast before.
Hey!
And here's Cassidy, who's also been on the podcast.
Hello. I'm back.
And Sobia, who will hopefully be on the podcast at a later date.
Hello.
And as always, there's Matt.
Mm-hmm. Today I'm wearing my tinfoil hat because obviously that's what we're talking about today. The past couple of conspiracy theory episodes, we've talked about the 2012 being the end of the world, and one of those points being Mandela Effects. And while the last episode I talked more specifically about the Statue of Liberty and the Mandela Effect going along with that, today I want to kind of break down some other Mandela Effects that are out there in the world. The reasoning for like the name of the Mandela Effect is based off of Nelson Mandela, who a lot of people remember as having passed away in the 1980s, when in reality he passed away in 2013. And so when the news of his passing in 2013, which, spoiler alert, that's after 2012, happened, many people were like, wait, I thought he died in prison when he was arrested in the 80s. Nothing else ever happened, which probably is what the South African government wanted you to think or have happened. Either way. So that was like kind of like the big thing that came out was Nelson Mandela's death. And because of that, and so many people almost being 50-50 on thinking that he had already passed away in 2013 is kind of where we get the fancier name as opposed to the medical jargon of false memories or collective memories, depending on who you are and how you want to talk about it. So yeah, I'm gonna be real honest. I don't remember thinking Nelson Mandela was dead in 2013, but I also don't think he was alive. So I don't think I had the implanted memory of 1980s, but I also was surprised that he was still alive in 2013.
I was kind of young, so I don't think I really even remembered much about.
So I was about to say, I was born in like the early 80s. So I was one of the ones that thought that Mandela was dead. But it wasn't like I was like up in politics in the 80s. You know, I was a small child. But it surprised me that he was still alive because I was like, no, I swear to God, he died. You know, like I remembered him dying.
I think for me, because he was just referred to as like Mandela was, I just assumed that he was dead. And then I found out that he wasn't. And I was like, oh, okay.
I know you got that scene in Alert and you're like, wait, hold up.
Like, what's his face from the Beatles?
Oh, yeah. Well, no, because Paul McCartney didn't really die.
So, well, that's what I'm saying. Everyone thought he died, but he didn't.
Well, I was like, that was a whole cover up, was Paul McCartney dying.
No, that's a whole, didn't we ever do a conspiracy theory?
Yeah, we did.
Watch that episode.
Thanks for plugging for me, Matt. Mm-hmm. You're the best. We have like 7 of these to go through. And
there's way more than that.
I mean, there's like 72 is what I like collectively counted on like my hands and toes and all those other joints.
How many hands and toes do you have?
I use the dog. A little bit helped. The next one that I definitely will admit that I totally buy into is the Berenstein Bears versus the Berenstain Bears. I like specifically remember Berenstein. I don't remember Berenstain with an A. However, the author's last name is Berenstain with an A. And that's where the name came from for the Bears. I had those books. I don't know.
Cartoon as well.
Yeah, there's a cartoon. I was like,
they call them the Berenstein Bears.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad
they spelled it wrong, apparently.
Oh.
I'm saying they spelled it correctly, but they called them how it's spelt wrong.
Yeah.
They called it the Berenstein Bears.
Are you sure about this?
I'm positive. I watched the cartoon.
Yeah, but
I remember that.
You got a Mandela effect that you thought it was Berenstein, but they were actually pronouncing it Berenstain.
Yeah.
I guess I have to go find the cartoons. I don't doubt that it's spelt the Berenstain Bears, but it could be pronounced the Berenstein Bears.
I remember it being pronounced the Berenstein Bears.
But it could be trickery.
Tricky dicks.
I'm pretty much on the wrong side of all of these. Like I remember the opposite on pretty much all of them of what it actually was. So I don't know if I just got Mandela extra hard or...
Well, I mean, if the world ended in 2012 and we all collided with another universe, and so we have the Berenstein versus Berenstain, it makes sense that half the population or chunks of the population remember one or the other. Which, first off, the 2012 ending like theory, I 110% will buy into it because you can't not prove it. Can't disprove. Proper English.
Okay. So what's the proof for it? Or is it just that it can't be disproved? Like, I'm not saying it didn't happen, because I mean, I think it's possible, but what, like, would you say that we're like in a simulation now?
So there's a lot of theories to it. And one of the reasons that people allude to it is that you have things like all of the Mandela effects that we're going to go through is one of the reasons that they were like, okay, so 2012 ended. It didn't physically end. We could, our universe could have collided with like another universe, like a multiverse, like they do in the comic books. Mm-hmm. We live in a comic book world now. Another thing is that we are living in the Matrix and the wires got crossed. And so some people came from universe 1 and some people came from like universe X. Who knows?
Had to consolidate on the human battery.
And because if you go back and you think about 2012 you, if you told 2012 you that even in 2016, Trump was going to run for president and not only run, but win, you wouldn't believe it. And you also...
Oh, I would have totally believed it.
Don't lie like that.
I'm not lying like that. I worked in a bar with, I worked in a bar that was primarily a conservative customer base. And that was like, I saw what had happened whenever, Palin ran with McCain. And I would have bought, like, after all, like the birther stuff and everything, if you had said, this guy's trying to get in politics and he would win, I would be like, I could see why. Because the Tea Party stuff was getting so crazy and it was just getting so, like, their rhetoric was starting to like amp up. And I'm not saying that you could have said like, yeah, Donald Trump's going to start this cult and things like that. And I would have been like, yeah, that's going to happen. But like, if you had been like, hey, 2016, this and this and this is going to happen and it's going to end up with Trump being president with the Conservative Party supporting him, I would have been like, I could see how that might happen.
I feel like you're an outlier, but also your background makes sense for you to be like, yes. Like at 2012, I thought we were going way more, or like shifting more to the progressive track. Mm-hmm. But then also I feel like anytime the pendulum swings a little too much to the left, it swings real far to the right. And then when it swings too far to the right, it'll go back to the left. Further. So we go back and forth. It just depends on which part of that pendulum is the angrier, more outspoken.
I agree with you. And I mean, I'm from like small town West Texas too. And so like, if you spend time with people that are from that region and things like that, like the reason that they are so irritated and like their anger is kind of palpable. Anyway, you can feel their anger. There's lots of different reasons because, I mean, there's just hasn't been any care given to the problems that are unique to rural people. So I don't really find it unusual or crazy when you combine that with, like a heavy dose of racism, that they would have swung the other direction completely.
Yeah, especially as hard as they did. So, okay. But the world still ended in 2012. And the reasoning is because you can't disprove it. And that's what I'm sticking with. However, we can like tear apart these Mandela effects. I mean, like, I don't need a whole episode devoted to each and every single one of them. Obviously, it didn't take much to talk about Berenstein versus Berenstain. We're not going to watch an episode together. That's weird. Mm-mm. We could, though. Anyways, the next one on my wonderful list, still going kind of like with cartoons, is Looney Tunes with a U versus Looney Tunes with 2 O's. I 110% remember it being tunes with an O, not musical tunes.
No, it's always been Tunes.
I thought it was Toons.
Mm-hmm. I always remember as Tunes, and I didn't actually realize that was a thing until I was just looking up other Mandela effects, and I was like, whoa, that's crazy.
I mean, it makes sense that Looney Tunes would be 2 O's because they're cartoons, but why would they pick Tunes? I don't know, but I've always remembered it being that way.
And that was like my reasoning, I think, of being like, I don't understand why it's a U, is because I'm like, why would you pick that? They're not musical in any regard. I mean, Bugs Bunny sings, but like he dresses as an opera singer. It's not very well on his own merit. But I also remember going to Six Flags like every other day when I was like in elementary school as a kid. And we had, or like Astroworld, and we had Looney Tunes. And I swear that there was stuff with O's on it, not the UNES.
At Six Flags?
Yeah.
Well, does Six Flags have the Warner Brother approval to use Looney Tunes?
Yes, they do.
Okay, well, there you go. Then the people that made that are just dumb then.
Yeah, but also like it's Houston. Sobia knows. Houston doesn't have the smartest people. I mean, we have smart people. We don't have the smartest.
Okay. I was going to say, excuse me. I still live here.
Spelling errors and stuff like that all over the place. Like, go on the internet and look up like hilarious spelling mistakes, and it's like just ridiculous. There's one that's like a college that has the University of Education and something like that, and they spelled everything wrong on it. And it's just ridiculous. It's like the irony.
Well, and I think one of the reasons that this is probably, I would consider to be forgivable, is that it's phonetically either or.
Right.
Tunes is tunes. Thanks, English. So English produces a lot of these issues just because you're like, they sound so similar. Well, they sound the same, and they start in with the same letter. Like, you can read words. Usually it's boomers on Facebook that share those pictures of like all those words that are kind of like jumbled. And like, if you can read this, you're super smart. I'm like, no, it's your brain processing words. So if you see like a new word you don't know, your brain is trying to commit it. So if you see it spelt wrong, as long as it's like the first and like last couple letters are the same, you always recognize it as that word, even if you saw it originally spelt wrong. So the next one I put on here was mostly for me because I had never heard of this, and it has like a historical concept, or has a historical-esque background, and it kind of involves a whole country. So I'm not from Italy. I don't speak Italian. I took Latin, so I'm going to butcher the heck out of this name. The Bologna Centrale, which is a railroad station in Italy. During August 1980, there was a massacre. I'm not trying to get excited about a massacre. I'm trying to make this sound exciting now. So there was a massacre at the railway thing. There's like a bomb. It blew up, and then the clock stopped. It's like Back to the Future Part 1 and 2 and like kind of 3, because you talk about the clock tower. So you have this clock tower that was damaged, and basically the time stopped. Well, almost immediately after it, the government was like, look, we're going to fix things up because obviously we can't have like a broken railway station. It's on parked tracks or whatever. They fixed everything, including the clock. However, just a few years later, the clock was intentionally stopped at the time of the massacre, so it would kind of pay tribute to what had happened at the area. But most people who were around then, and even people that knew that the clock, that actually had signed documents helping, making sure the clock went back after it had already been fixed to like show support for the historical significance, were like, no, the clock's always been broken. We never fixed it, even though they fixed it.
And there's proof of it being fixed.
And there's proof of it having that short term where it was fixed. It wasn't like, oh, we're going to fix it and let it run for like a week. It was years that this clock worked. But as a collective in this huge part of Italy, everyone was like, no, the clock's always been stopped since the bombing. I find it interesting because you have like this whole country that is under that false memory of just being like, no, we all remember it happening this way. And even people who were part of helping, on the non-Mandela Effect side, that were part of like, I guess like you can call it the real history, quotation marks, real history. They remember it as the fake history, which I think it goes to show that you have people that are very not susceptible to false memories, but are more likely to kind of fall in line with the beliefs of people around them. So let's say that the exact color of the sky, but everybody around you is like, no. You're like, look, it's like a turquoise. It's not turquoise, but we're going to use turquoise as an example. You know that the sky is turquoise. Everybody else around you is like, no, it's sea green. You get to a point where you're like, it's sea green, not because you just want to like stop fighting people about what color it is. It's more of they say it enough that you kind of start developing these false memories and this false reality behind it, which is what happened here. Like, you had a destructive event, damaged just, the clock tower, Marty McFly couldn't get back, and voila.
So that also reminds me of a thing in psychology. I want to say it's the eyewitness effect.
Yes.
Where, you ask people what happened and they may not give you the actual recount because they've heard it from other people and they think that's what happened, even if it didn't. So I think traumatic events like that can also cause that. And so the people who were part of the original quote unquote history where the clock tower did stop and then restarted, maybe because it was just such a traumatic event that their brains have just kind of blocked that out of their memory.
Yes, definitely. PTSD is one of the reasons that people develop false memories. And it's not to say that it's a bad thing to have a false memory. When it comes to like going to like a hypnotist and you're like, okay, I want to not necessarily forget these memories, but I don't want to associate happiness with food. So when you're happy, you eat. You're like, no, when I'm happy, I want to do something else. Or they want to implant those false memories. And that's more of like a psychological thing to kind of help. However, we have these false memories that we've kind of created as like whether it's like a region or a country or collectively online with not knowing the difference between Berenstain and Berenstain.
That's interesting because I think too, I mean, a group of people or a country of people, a region of people could be gaslighted into false memories as well. So if you were to have a government that specifically wanted people to remember an event in a certain way, they could use mass manipulation to create this false narrative and implant those false memories into a population.
So that is that's exactly how countries that project that the Holocaust never happened, they assume that everyone else's government or those governments of those that said they were part of liberating those implanted false memories in their populace. And that's why they're like, we weren't a part of it. There's no way that this happened. Literally, the USSR, when it was in power, totally implanted false memories with propaganda and gaslighting their own citizens throughout however huge that landmass was of miles in the population, having these memories of how great it was being a part of Soviet Russia, when honestly, not really.
I would assume that in North Korea, it's kind of the same. I know that they have propaganda that has told them like different things about the outside world so that they think that North Korea is like this leader in the outside world and all of this stuff, which is completely untrue. So I know that they use that tactic as well on their population to keep them complacent.
And do you ever feel like I don't even have to be high or drunk to have these thoughts where I just get like really into it and I just kind of sit there and I get scared because I'm like, oh my God, what if we're living in that simulation and I have everything I thought was real was a false memory?
So I kind of think that we are in a certain way. I mean, if you think about what a country that essentially lives with a pretty big sense of nationalism and what that takes and the kind of propaganda that takes on us as Americans, then I mean, we probably are living with some false narratives. Look at the narrative of like World War II in America, where we came in and kicked everybody's ass and that's why we won. That's not true. And they also pretend that the reason why is because we felt so bad for Jews getting gassed. We knew that was happening. I mean, we knew it for months. They came here in boats and we sent them back. Yeah. So I think in America, we sell fake narratives all the time. And it's going on right now in our history classes where they're selling fake narratives around slavery. Even the idea that America was founded as this Christian nation is completely false, you know? So that happens a lot to us as well.
Yeah. I don't think that there's a country that hasn't in some form or fashion done that, where they've implanted some, we want to control the narrative of how this happens. And because of the fact that our news stations really aren't regulated on a journalistic aspect, they can literally report whatever they want and they're going to create these false narratives. So if you are like, when Rush Limbaugh passed away and if he was the only person that you listened to, who do you go to now? You know what I'm saying? So you had all these memories from Rush Limbaugh and however he portrayed the news, you now have to find a new person and you have to and if they contradict Rush, what do you do?
Right, your little bubble is burst.
I believe I heard recently that that's what some of the problem that we're seeing right now is the fact that these people, they'll take the alternative facts and believe them because if you tell them differently and they see the truth, then it just shatters their esteem, basically, their self-esteem, their thoughts of like what was right. It makes them feel crazy. So it's damaging. If you think about people that like listen to Tucker Carlson 24 hours a day, which how anybody listens to Tucker Carlson 24 hours a day, I don't know, but people do. And think about the fear mongering that he does. Like right now, if you watch on like news boards and things like that, people are super, super scared of what's coming over the southern border. There's COVID coming over the southern border. And it's really weird too, because you're like, you don't think that people that live outside of America know to wear a mask and wash their hands. Been in a pandemic for a year, what a silly thought.
Yeah. I was like, first off, people in other countries were wearing masks way quicker than we were over here. Yeah. And way more, they were just also better at washing their hands.
We have the highest death rate and case rate in the entire world. We've handled it the worst. They should be more scared of us than we are of their COVID.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, it's kind of the same thing for people who are being told to listen to something other than Fox News, because I actually saw this the other day and it actually wasn't something I knew, but I guess it was never something I questioned either. But there's a picture of Kamala Harris not saluting the military, and Fox News like degraded her for that, when in reality she's a civilian. The only person who's supposed to salute is the commander-in-chief. So here's, you know, Fox News telling us that she is this horrible, terrible, no good, very bad person, when in reality she's actually doing what she's supposed to.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that it was made popular for everybody to salute the military under Reagan. Well, going back to more of my childhood, I want to talk about the Shazam movie that never happened.
Mm-hmm.
Not the really good one that came out a couple years ago.
No, the DC one?
Yeah, that was a great movie.
Yeah, it was fun.
It was adorable, super happy and great. However, there's a lot of people that think that this movie in 1994 came out called Shazam that had Sinbad, that wonderful comedian, in it. And he was a genie and he granted all these wishes. However, in reality, that movie never existed. But most people attribute to the fact that in 1996, there was a movie that featured the not Michael Jordan of basketball, Shaquille O'Neal, in Shazam, or in Kazam, not Shazam. I think Shazam is so much more fun to say than Kazam.
Yeah, it's lame.
Yeah, Kazam is lame, kind of like Shaq. Anyways.
I think it's funny that you called Shaq not the Michael Jordan.
Look.
He was trying to do a Space Jam and he just blew it.
He wanted to be like Mike. Couldn't be like Mike. I mean, look, anyone who knows me knows Space Jam is literally the card you always play during Cards Against Humanity on me, because I'll pick it no matter what the hell it is.
Mm-hmm.
Space Jam on VHS. Done. It doesn't even matter. It doesn't have to fit. Don't care. It's Space Jam. So like, this is like one of those where a lot of people are like, look, how did you get to this? Like, that's kind of a little racist that you're confusing two black men with these genies, right? Well, first off, kids, we're all really bad about knowing people, like knowing how different people are anyways. Like literally as a kid, I used to confuse my own family members because I'm not the smartest person. So I attribute this to being a child. But there were these Sinbad the Pirate movies that came out in 94. I believe that Sinbad the Sailor was in these movies. They're on VHS. And when they came out on VHS, there was like, because it was really hard to like skip through like commercials and stuff as a kid. And also you really liked watching the previews for like whatever movie was coming out in like 6 years. And there was like 30 of them before a movie on VHS. Cassidy, I know you've never seen a VHS.
I've seen VHS.
Have you seen a movie on VHS, or have you
Yes, I have.
But have you like watched a movie on a VCR?
Yes, we used to have Cinderella and 101 Dalmatians. I'd have to rewind it, and I'd always cover my eyes so I could rewind it. You know that massive TV we had in the basement? We had a VHS player on that.
Man, now I feel bad for like bringing you on to make fun of you because you're so much better than me.
Yeah, we didn't own Titanic, but we had a couple Disney movies.
I had Titanic, 2 VHS tapes. Anyways, so you have all these commercials before these Sinbad, the pirate movies or whatever, Sinbad the Sailor movies. They were out, like, I think originally came out in 94, but when the VHS came out, it had previews for the Kazam movie. They came out in 96 that did have Shaquille O'Neal, not Sinbad the Sailor. And because they were so close, as a kid, I think I would associate previews with the actual movie because you can't skip them now.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes sense in a kid's mind. Like probably as a parent, you knew there were differences. But as a kid, you probably were like, I didn't know that there was a difference between what the preview was versus the movie. Because you also probably thought that a lot of movies had real life people and cartoons in them.
Funny to think that VHS tapes had previews on them as well. Like that's the sad part. Think about that for a second. Like, you know, DVDs don't have previews on them anymore.
There wasn't really another way for them to advertise movies back then, though, because people weren't on the internet on movie boards and forums and things like that. You definitely didn't have ads on websites or anything. So there was no other way except for the beginning of the movie to reach those certain audiences. And even back then with kids' movies, it was, for a lot of people, it was literally the only way to reach kids because there was no Nickelodeon or 24-hour-a-day kids networks or kids programming. Like I remember growing up, we had 3 channels. None of them had kids anything on them until you got to like TGIF with Full House and stuff on Friday night, you know, and then Saturday morning cartoons. So there was no kids channels or anything back then.
You know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought like the Disney Channel only had like Disney cartoon like commercials. They didn't really have like commercials when I was a kid.
I don't remember if I had
so like,
channels as a kid.
I mean, I was spoiled.
You were poor.
Like that's why opposites attract, Matt. So I just remember like watching the Disney Channel and I don't remember seeing anything outside of like Disney movie previews. But so if you went to the movie theater and you saw movies at the movie theater, of course you would be. And that's why they used to have like 30-minute long previews. So your movie starts at 6:15. You don't need to show up till like 6:30, if that.
Are you a monster? Because I have to be there before the previews start. You have to see the previews.
No, but I'm saying like there was like those, I think there's a comedian that did a joke about that, about like how long the previews would last. It was Dane Cook. And I was like, no, I get there before. Like we go to the Draft House.
They're mild for the Draft House.
Yeah, the Draft House doesn't have many.
They're like 2 or 3.
But I go for the beginning part because I like the fact that they play random movie trailers or random trailers. Mm-hmm. So anyways, the Shazam movie that never existed.
The thing that people I think are attributing it to confusing them is there are like images or scenes within the Sinbad movies where like he's either dressed up or like something, or he's pretending to be a genie or something like that. And I think that's where the crisscross of wires where people's heads are going, and the whole preview movie thing on a movie is confusing kids as well. So yeah, I can see where the confusion comes from, because I was in that boat being like, oh, Sinbad did a movie that was almost like Kazam, though I remember Kazam as well, but I remember Sinbad being in a different thing, but they were very similar. And yeah, no, that's not true at all. So I don't misremember it being a different thing, but I do remember them both existing in tandem.
Yeah.
So that's, I guess that's a different thing.
Yeah, I think that was me too, because I was like, I know that Shaquille O'Neal was a genie, but I also think I thought that movie was called Shazam.
That could be that. They're just misremembering the name as opposed to the entirety of the thing.
Well, because Shazam is easier to say than Kazam. Shh is better than K.
Yeah. Well, Shazam is a word that's been used for a number of years.
There was also a Barbera? Thank you. There was also a Hanna-Barbera cartoon that was called Shazam or something along those lines. As a kid, if you watch a whole bunch of kids programming, it's very easy to get stuff mixed up and jumbled, especially when you have so many like things.
Similar names or similar ideas.
Yeah, that's why you shouldn't have like John, James, and Jim between like 4 different shows, because all you're going to do is jumble up all their names because they're so similar.
Well, and it's not like either one of those was like a breakaway hit or anything. You know what I mean? Like they were in the theater for a little bit and then they went straight to video. So if you saw them, chances are it was on video. And at that point, you may not have even known, it was just something your parents rented because there wasn't a whole lot of kids movies that came out back then.
Blockbuster was popping on a Friday night though. But look, don't you dare say that Shaquille O'Neal didn't try to be Space Jam number 2, because that's what I felt.
I think he just wanted to have something to do after his basketball career. And
I think he was still playing in 96 though.
What?
Yeah, he was still playing in 96 for sure.
Anyways, I think that's because like he went to the Lakers and that's when he did Kazam.
I think he was a Laker in 1996.
He was.
Look at this. I don't even know that much about NBA basketball. I'm like, I know that Shaquille O'Neal was over there.
So I only know this because my brother is a huge basketball fan and he went off to college in 99. So anything prior to that, I actually know about the NBA. Anything after that, I have absolutely no idea. Like, ask me who's on the Rockets right now, and I couldn't name a single person because I'm pretty sure like half the team just got traded this year, and I don't even know. I don't know who's on the Rockets. Don't know who's on the Texans. I just know anything pre-99.
So I had to look it up. He played for the Lakers 96 to 2004, and he didn't get out of basketball until 2011. His last year was with the Celtics. Damn. Random. Weird, right? Yeah. He also played for the Phoenix Suns and the Cavaliers. What? I really only remember Magic, Lakers, and Heat, to be honest with you.
Yeah. I remember the Magic.
We moved here in 94. Between 94 and like 99, I actually know some NBA stuff. Anything prior to 94, don't have a clue, including Sinbad, because in Pakistan, Sinbad's an actual genie, man. We have an entire freaking Adventureland named Sinbad, and I used to go there.
Wait, do you mean like a theme park Adventureland?
Well, there you go. There's
called
more.
Sinbad?
Yeah, Sinbad's a genie. He did a movie genie thing. Yeah, just more fuel to the fire.
No, like he's a cartoon in Pakistan.
Oh.
Sinbad. It's called Sinbad. And there was like an entire, not a theme park type thing, because they don't really have theme parks back over there, but kind of like you would see like I guess arcade?
Ooh, like Chuck E. Cheese.
Yeah, like Chuck E. Cheese, except it was all Sinbad. like it's pronounced, well, I pronounce it Sinbad because that's how it is in Pakistan, but like Sinbad, like it was all Sinbad related, and he's a freaking genie in Pakistan, like the cartoon.
So I'm sitting there and I'm like, this
Effect,
sounds
like,
kind of familiar.
When I read that, I was like, wait, what? So I actually
Is that based on like an old story or something? Because now I'm like, in my head, I'm like, well, that sounds kind of familiar too.
I was only 6 when I moved here, so I don't know the entire story, but I just remember I used to like going there because there were a lot of fun rides and like games you could play, and there's not many of those over there. So it was one of the few places.
Folklore heroes.
I loved going to.
I think so.
Yeah, I feel like he's like Paul Bunyan or Hercules. You know,
it's from Arabian Nights.
Yeah, he's a character. So there's lore and this and that about him. So the fact that he's called Sinbad and there's a guy named Sinbad that's a comedian doing stuff that's similar to that and getting the whole thing confused. Yeah, it all makes sense. It's just muddled information all mashed together. And people just want
to. So I just had to Google it, and I found like these disturbing pictures of Sinbad where he has like lightning bolts coming out of his fingers, and he's dressed like you would picture a genie in your head.
Yeah, they're probably fake because people will they get into the false memory, and then people will put out fake shit just to trick people into thinking that it's real.
I am so shook right now.
I'm pretty sure Sinbad, the comedian, actually talked about this. How all of it's bullcrap. And he actually took like professional photos to put on the internet purposefully to make people go crazy. Like he did it himself just to freak people out. I'm almost positive that he did that intentionally just to freak people out. Like, yeah, it's real, guys, but he knows that it's not, just to troll people. It's not
I was
real.
like, literally,
it's not real.
The movie poster I'm looking at has the lamp from Aladdin, and the S is the S you used to draw in 8th grade.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's the same one I saw.
Real.
That's not what I saw either.
People will go to the lengths to troll people.
That's the other thing, too. I think with social media, it's so much easier to troll people, to implant those false memories in people, whether they're real or not, and also to create your own.
Right.
So it's like a create your own adventure, but create your own lie that you now purported to people as a false memory.
Kind of like when you bring home a new pet and you're like, no, we've had that dog.
This is why we can't have a house yet, because I'm going to have an army of guinea pigs.
Oh, God.
The army of guinea pigs is going to happen. And oh my gosh, they're going to have the best names ever. I don't know what they are yet, but I'm going to get, they're all going to be puns.
I love it.
All right. So we have like 2.5-ish more left to go, which 1.5 of them revolve around Star Wars, which between Star Wars and Star Trek, I'm more of a Star Wars fan.
I don't know Star Trek. Crap.
Yeah. But also, I definitely am pretty sure that I was Mandela. We're going to call it Mandela'ed. That's the verb.
I think everyone was Mandela on this one, quite frankly.
Yeah, on the 2 of them. So the one that everyone, I think even like diehard Star Wars fans, really do believe that Darth Vader says, Luke, I am your father. But if you go back and watch it, so if you got the money and you spring it on Disney Plus, go watch the last 20 minutes of the movies, and literally Luke's over here like, I know what you did to my father, Darth Vader. Darth Vader's like, no, I am your father. And then, no! And everybody, like, it's a whole thing. He's like, I watched it yesterday, so like, I kind of remember. It's been 24 hours. So the phrase that we remember so vividly that we associate with Star Wars of Luke, I am your father, that people use all the time as like cultural references, never happened. However, in your head, it sounds a lot better than no, I am your father, right?
Maybe that's because when you say no, I am your father, as a cultural reference, that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense as to what you're talking about. If you say Luke, automatically, then people have a frame of reference, Luke Skywalker, I am your father. It makes more sense without context.
Exactly. And also, back when Star Wars came out, we didn't have the internet, and it wasn't direct to VHS, DVD, laser disc, whatever was going on back then. So you watched it, you couldn't rewind and immediately be like, wait, what did he say? So you have people coming out of the movie theater, and you have these people that are remembering kind of, this is what you thought you heard. So if we went and saw a movie and you were like, no, they said this, and I'm like, no, they said this, one of us is right and one of us might be wrong. We're both wrong. But if you say it, I'm like, oh, that sounds better than the no, I am your father, I'm going to latch onto it.
Right.
We go and talk about it with some other people who've seen it because Star Wars was such a huge hit. Empire Strikes Back was it's a good movie. Like, it's probably the best sequel movie ever. but it also was seen by so many people that you have like first people that come out are like, oh man, that line about Luke, I am your father.
And it was kind of the pivotal point of the movie. Like that was a huge reveal.
Yeah, that last 20 minutes. And it's one of those things where I'm like, it makes sense that we all kind of jumbled it up. Because again,
the context thing where it's like you're trying to associate the line, and it's a lot easier to be like, Luke, I am your father. Oh boy, that's from Star Wars, obviously. Not, no, I am your father. It could be anything, you know? It makes sense.
And I think like if you want to like dad joke it up, you just substitute your kid's name with Luke. Right. Or like Luke for your kid's name. And then you get to, you know, dad joke it up, be like, ha ha ha, Matt, I am your father.
That's another thing that's probably kind of warped the perspective of the quote, is people using other people's names, and then instead of using a fake person's name, they're like, oh, the real line is Luke, because why would you say anything else but a person's name?
Like, I thought it was Luke, I am your father. I've seen that movie quite a few times.
They even quote it wrong in another movie, Tommy Boy.
And that's the thing, is that we've just remembered it as, you know, as a culture of, you know, pop culture reference. We've remembered it wrong. But if you ask somebody, hey, this is not what it was, then they'd be like, oh, well, somebody greenlit it. So, meh. And so the other Star Wars one that I'm pretty sure that most people don't, I would say not know, unless you're telling me you also.
I wouldn't even say it's even important. But.
It's not important. But so many people remember that C-3PO was completely gold when in reality, his right shin is silver. And honestly, I went back and like watched parts of Empire Strikes Back before he was taken apart. And I'm like, yeah, that is a little silver, but the silver isn't like silver and gold when they're next to each other. It's not as a big contrast as you would think it is.
Especially when they're reflecting light. And, you know, most lights are going to be an amber colored anyway. So at least back then, every light is a fucking yellowish tint. So a reflective mirror-like surface like silver is going to look gold. So. Yeah.
And we didn't have high def back then, or the quality of film that we have now. You know, it would have been filmed in a completely different. You have to even wonder, is there any intention for them behind it being silver? Or was that just kind of happenstance because they were on a budget?
That's a good question. Why was it silver? Why did they decide to do one leg silver for whatever reason?
There's got to be some sort of lore to it that, you know, he's part of assembled parts or whatever.
Right.
That you've been taken apart so often or whatever as an android that it makes sense that you would have at least like some part different.
Right.
Well, and weren't they kind of built out of like scrap type material? Then, I mean, it makes sense that they would stick some kind of random stuff in there to keep some sort of fidelity to them being built out of scrap.
Yeah. And so it didn't help with perpetuating this false memory or false narrative that C-3PO was all gold, that the majority of licensed toys that came out had him as all gold because it's cheaper.
Right. Why make one piece of him a different color?
And then same with costumes as well.
Yeah, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to spend the extra money for costuming or for toys to make a piece silver, especially when you consider how toys are made. Like if it's a plastic toy and the mold and things like that, if something's straight gold, you don't actually have to paint it. You just make it all in the plastic and it's easier swoop, you know? So I'd wonder if that had something to do with the fact that they didn't keep that up. And I mean, I feel like too, it's a little bit trivial because there's no specific reason that it's mentioned or anything like that. It's just to keep consistency, you know? So I feel like that it just makes more sense for people to kind of, you know, whatever that one.
In the prequels, episode 2, he has silver plating as opposed to gold because he's basically just a fucking scrap robot. And at the end of the prequel movies, that's the last time you see him until episode 4, which is, you know, the original Star Wars. And he's just a droid at that point. Like, they never really give context as to why he has silver legs on the first movie, which was at the time the only movie. And then they kind of like built the character around maybe his silver leg. That's why he's silver. He only has one silver leg because they painted him gold and didn't paint his one leg. I don't fucking know.
Well, maybe like, you know, something had happened and the only thing left was like external wise was that one silver piece and everything else then had to be like a new gold robot.
Right.
Because I think they look slightly different.
What is
prequel and
oh yeah, it's more like a scrap silver as opposed to like chrome, you know. Yeah. It's more of a chrome leg than silver, but yeah, it's a shiny leg or shiny coating.
Yeah.
Whereas in the prequel movies, it's more of like a shoddy thrown together. It's the same form. So they probably just coated him in gold. So I don't know. It's weird.
I didn't know I was married to such a Star Wars enthusiast.
I never really paid attention to the new ones. If he has the silver legs still, I never paid attention. He does or doesn't. I know he's a red arm, so that's quite vibrant.
That's the other thing. It's very vibrant.
Such a contrast from, gold and silver are very almost exchangeable in a lighting situation. But a bright red matte leg or arm is kind of hard to mess.
That is really hard to mess.
So I don't know if he has a silver legs still in like the newer movies. They might have unintentionally omitted it due to the Mandela Effect, or they left it in. I just never noticed it. It'd be funny if they left it out due to the Mandela Effect, or if they'll just, even if they did left it out unintentionally, they just make up some bullshit like, oh yeah, he got a new leg.
I mean, it wouldn't be the first time that Star Wars, let alone Disney, has done something like that. Well, so we're going to talk about the last one, which is a logo, which I'm going to be completely honest, I'm pretty sure I was Mandela affected, Mandela'ed on this. So it's the Fruit of the Loom logo. And many people remember there being a cornucopia behind the fruit, when in reality, it's just fruit. Like, I remember wearing Fruit of the Loom as a kid, as an adult, probably currently, well, not this minute currently, but like currently in my life, I have Fruit of the Loom stuff. And I think when I look at the logo, I just like instantly just assume that there's this cornucopia there, and it's not there. And it's apparently never been there either.
I was Mandela'ed on this one, hardcore. Like, I swear that there's a cornucopia. I don't know where this image in my head would have come from otherwise of the cornucopia with the Fruit of the Loom fruit. So the creator of the logo says that there was never a cornucopia, but not good enough. Not good enough, because I swear there was.
So there is a theory behind why people think that there's a cornucopia. I got you on this one because I was like,
there's actually a theory on it. Nice.
So the logo that was used predominantly between 1962 to 1978, which has like the most advertising was made around then, actually has the fruit arranged in a manner which has some brown leaves behind it.
Like a swoop.
That can look like a...
So there's an 80s logo?
70s, 60s and 70s. Yeah. Okay. So it's like 16-year logo that they have these brown leaves and similarly colored fruit at the bottom, arranged in a manner which, via some squinting, so if you squint at it, like, it can look like a cornucopia versus just leaves behind it.
So I'm looking at the logos right now, and I see what you're meaning there, but in my head, this is the Fruit of the Loom logo.
Yes, the one with the legit cornucopia. I really don't know why I think that. I wonder if it's just because if you look at like the regular Fruit of the Loom logo, literally you are replacing nothing. All you're doing is adding like a little bit of brown. And that's why I'm like, if there were some brown leaves behind it, it would make sense just for visual.
So I remember this logo. This is the one that says 1993 on here. I remember that one. And that's the one with the brown leaves behind it. All I'm saying is that is obviously not a fucking cornucopia.
No, you're right. It don't like that doesn't look like it. And I'm like,
I mean, I just can't. I swear to God, there was a cornucopia. So when I saw like, oh yeah, this is one of the Mandela effects, I was like, wait a minute, there's not a cornucopia. And I was racking my brain, and it says no, but I swear to God, there was a cornucopia. There's no real evidence of there being a cornucopia, obviously. Like, the evidence is contrary to there being a cornucopia, but it's interesting how that must have developed, and it makes me wonder. And this is what I was kind of thinking about it. I think that there may have been a series of dishes or bakeware that had a very similar print to it. And I think that it may have been one that was popular in the 70s and 80s that, probably younger people's grandma had, older people's, maybe their mom had it. But I'm wondering if the fruit looks similar to a set of like bakeware.
That makes sense. Like
I don't remember the term for the certain kind of bakeware, but it's white. Flattenware, maybe? I'm not much of a domestic
I'm not either
person, but my grandma, though, tons of different types of baking things and dishes and stuff. And actually, everybody in my family is kind of like that. It's really weird. Lots of dishes. But I want to say, after thinking about it, that maybe that fruit was similar to a design that was on that flatware and silverware, the bakeware. And it had a cornucopia on it.
Now you have me Googling this.
I know. We're over here like all Googling.
So I'm wondering if that was a very popular style of like bakeware or something at the time, or maybe it was a cheap style of bakeware. And that's where this memory is coming from.
Like I literally Googled and I got a whole bunch, and this literally reminds me of my kitchen growing up.
Where though I think maybe there was one where the fruit looked more similar to Fruit of the Loom.
That's the thing is I'm like, there are so many in here that I'm sure that there was. And it probably doesn't help that, you know, at the peak of remembrance, they probably had a logo change and you probably associated the older logo with whatever you may have saw with that cornucopia.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, there was always like, I know that people had like Thanksgiving plates that had cornucopias and things like that on it. So it makes me wonder if maybe that's where that's coming from.
I mean, I wouldn't put it past it whatsoever. Mm-hmm. That makes sense to me. Because you can sit there and look up like Thanksgiving stuff. Like I'm over here looking at Thanksgiving images, and so many of them have the cornucopia and they all have the grapes and the apple, which is the stuff that I remember from Fruit of the Loom, like hardcore.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't even tell you what the other fruit were. Now that I'm looking, they're other colored grapes. So JK, I just remember the purple grapes.
Yeah, it was like grapes and then orange maybe.
Just an apple. So what I have is an apple and then yellow grapes, green grapes, and purple grapes. But I could have also sworn that there was more fruit as opposed to grapes.
Yeah, you know, I wonder too if it is off of bakeware, you know, back then most people had like the same kind of bakeware. So I might also wonder if it was like disposable. Like, was there a print like that on paper plates or on some sort of disposable bakeware where there's not like record really of it? Like it's not on vintage dishes that you can purchase. It would be like on a paper plate. Was there a paper plate that printed that type of logo or that thing on it? That's why people remember it, is because it was on everybody's paper plate.
You know, that's probably very true. Like, what if someone got sued for the logo because it looked like too much like Fruit of the Loom, and that's why everything just wound up going to like a dollar sale or was like super cheap, but they had made so many of it, everyone and their mama had it. For being cheap and getting like the cheapest paper plates. We didn't get the hefty ones that could have a steak on it. We weren't fancy.
Right. 70s and 80s too, that's when microwavable food became more and more popular. So paper plates became bigger and you had more latchkey kids and less family dinners and things like that. So I would wonder if that's kind of contributing to what we're remembering there.
I probably said something different already beforehand when we started talking about this, but I think if you put different Fruit of the Loom logos in front of me, I don't know if I could actually pick out the right one with or without a cornucopia.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know.
I think that cornucopia is coming from somewhere. It's not coming from brown leaves behind them. I think it's actually coming from a legit memory of fruit that looked like that. And now that I'm thinking about it, because it's not showing up on Google searches as vintage bakeware, I'm wondering if it was paper plates.
If you're thinking of like Thanksgiving, because they have those cornucopias during Thanksgiving, like Black Friday sale ads, having something along those lines.
Like maybe newspaper advertisements for a restaurant or something for just a special. So it wasn't like something that really carried through time, you know? It was just like, oh, this was a commonly run logo that Luby's did during Thanksgiving or something like that.
Or even something like from Kmart or Walmart or Target, where they talked about you can get, you know, the Thanksgiving dinner. You can get your turkey over here at Target, as well as getting your socks, your Fruit of the Loom socks. To like, you know, get everything that you need for Christmas all in one stop right after Thanksgiving and having the picture of the Thanksgiving meal. Because I'm like, there's no way that you can like just fake this up. And I really like looking at those leaves. I don't believe the leaf theory, because I'm like, that's not what I remember. I wasn't alive, nor would I really have watched older commercials in a sense to have that memory. But I remember seeing that. So I'm like, it's definitely something. And it's not because I remember fake Fruit of the Loom logos.
Yeah. And, you know, I would wonder too, like, there's so many things that kind of look like that people had back in the day, like refrigerator magnets. And everybody seemed to have the same one. You know, when special packaging came out around Thanksgiving for like Country Crock or whatever, you would have kept those tubs around because you would have used them for leftovers. So it makes me wonder, because there wasn't, I feel like now we have more individualized stuff than we used to because there's more options. But back then, everybody had the same bakeware. Everybody had the same paper plates. Everybody had the same everything, because there wasn't so many options unless somebody was really wealthy. Everybody had pretty much the same stuff. So it makes me wonder if it was something like that everybody had.
Yeah. And I mean, like, I remember so many people having literally like the avocado. My great aunts and my great grandparents all had like the avocado kitchens.
And I don't know if you guys remember like the corn on the cob stuff. That was another one that was really popular in the 70s and 80s.
No.
And maybe even before. It was like they had a full set, and my grandma's got them all. It was a full set of like corn dishes. And I think they originated, like there's an old version and there's a new version. I want to say that they originated like Depression era, maybe a little bit after that. And then they did like a reissue where the corn's a little bit lighter.
Okay. This now makes sense. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Like literally my great grandparents were hoarders of things because they lived through the Depression. So dishware was one of the things that they hoarded.
Yeah. And I think that was really common back then because my grandma was the same way. She had just like a massive amount of dishware and anything that you could think of for your kitchen. But then we also, it was like the recyclables, using things until they basically just fell apart, which was another kind of trademark of that.
Yeah, that's definitely a Depression era carryover, was use things till I would assume that the term, drive your car into the ground probably originated from buying, one of the first Fords and literally driving it.
Yeah.
Anymore.
Yeah. I mean, that generation was really, gosh, they were probably less environmentally conscious than us, but way better at being environmentalists than we are.
And it wasn't like they meant to be. They just happened to be.
Right. I think it was like just out of necessity.
Like my great grandparents would be the people that would buy 20 pounds of potatoes. And I'm like, why are we having potatoes for every meal? And they'd be like, no, they were just a really good sale. And you never know when you need more potatoes.
What I find the most interesting of all of it, though, the entire thing is not necessarily the separate circumstances, but the effect as a general thing.
Right.
The collective fake memories to me is way more interesting than the specifics. I think that it's also interesting the theories that people have come up with on why it happened, like the world ending in 2012. I think things like that are just so much more fascinating than the individual recollections.
I 100% agree with you on that. Like the people that are like, I remember it like this, they have a hard time admitting they're wrong. Humans in general have a hard time admitting they're wrong. I admit this, that I have a hard time admitting that I'm wrong. So to be told you're wrong about a memory you have from like your childhood or even from like 6 months ago when you saw something, it's hard to believe. And so you're being told, so then you start questioning a lot more things. It's easier to have a conspiracy theory than it is to come to the realization that you remembered something wrong.
Right.
Yeah, I think you're right on that. And I think it's because too, like if you cannot trust yourself in your own memory of situations, or if you can't trust what your eyes saw, then what really can you believe? I mean, it puts your entire reality at stake, really.
It really does. It's up there in those. It makes sense why people come up with conspiracy theories to protect themselves from the Mandela effects or from being Mandela'ed. But at the same time, to just realize that you remembered something wrong is probably for the best. Same when it comes to history. A lot of people were taught history incorrectly, especially when it comes to like slavery and stuff in the US. So it would be for, the benefit of all for us to all kind of relearn that. But people swear, they're like, this is what I learned. This is what I remember learning. This is the end.
Right. They take it as gospel as opposed to maybe they got taught wrong.
Or maybe they had a shitty teacher who came in hungover every day.
Or that. Yeah,
that would have been.
Well, and they're not looking at what the agenda might be there either.
You're an influence.
They have it
being told school to learn things. Like, why would you go to school to learn wrong things? Doesn't make any sense. So
right. They haven't delved into like the critical thinking on why someone might have a reason to teach them incorrectly.
Right.
Yeah. That's going to conclude this week's episode of But Have You Heard About Conspiracy Theory Edition? Dun, 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 dun. I was joined by a whole bunch of people. I'm not going to make them sound off. I am sure that they all also hope you have a fabulous weekend or rest of your day, evening, morning, whatever it may be. Grab another cup of coffee. And if you fell for any of these, it's okay. We're all in the same boat together. And with that, have a good one. Bye.
Bye.